My name is Garrett Hill. I am the head judge for Wsk Street skateboarding discipline. In the test sets that you're about to view, we use the exact same judging process and criteria that we applied at any World Skate qualification event, and as well as the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. All right, getting into the overall design and overall feel of the field of play at this skate park. Straight out of the gates, you'll probably notice that this is a rather large skate park. There are a lot of different options here. It caters to all different kinds of skateboarding. So technically we should be able to see all different kinds of styles be able to excel in this kind of environment. This is what I like to see in a course that caters to different kinds of skateboarding because it's exciting to watch. What you'll notice is we have a classic big section handrail. We'll refer to that as the main handrail or big handrail. It's around 10 stairs big. It's round. It's a very versatile sized rail. This is not only big enough for the men to be able to get technical on, but this is small enough for the women to be able to get pretty tech on this as well. So I like this size handrail. We also have probably one of the biggest obstacles I've ever seen at a skate park, and that is in this bump to massive monster hubba. This thing is about chest high. So if you see people doing tricks on this, rather in their run or in the single trick section, it is going to get rewarded because even launching up to a 50-50 on this thing felt absolutely bonkers. In addition to these obstacles, we have a lot of supplemental variations of obstacles. We have bump to flat bars, we have bumps to ledges, we have a small hubba ledge on the outer wall of the course, and we also have smaller handrails. So there are lots of different options. There's stairs, there's handrails, there's quarter pipes as well. In order to utilize this course in the best way, you're gonna need to be able to use those quarter pipes. You're gonna see in this test set, the runs that stand apart from the others are the ones that are able to utilize those quarter pipes in order to just travel the length of the skate park and get as many tricks in as humanly possible. So it's going to be interesting, lots of variation here. This is our anchor run for Wsk Skateboard. Starting with a 270 back lip on the big handrail. Frontside 180 into 50-50, didn't lock there. So that's going to count against the style and execution judging criteria. Nollie frontside nose slide to fakie on the bump to ledge. It's pretty cool. Big spin frontside board slide on the 5-stair rail. Landing with speed, he's using the course really well. Frontside 5 on the quarter pipe is always preferred to keep the speed going and the flow and consistency as opposed to getting off of your board. And ending with a frontside 270 lip slide to fakie on the big rail the same way that he started. So the overall impression of this run is that these are mildly to moderately technically difficult tricks. They're done well. He used the course well. There's a little bit of repetition, it feels like, here with the 270 lip slides, and there's no flip tricks here. That's kind of the main thing that jumps out at me at this run. And deciding on where to place this kind of a run that's strong, that has technically difficult tricks but no flip tricks, it's hard for me to justify putting a run like this into the 80s. But I can justify putting it right at the ceiling of it, knocking on the door of the 80s. So if you're in that zone, then good job, but hard to justify putting a run like this into the 80s without flip tricks. And now for our anchor trick from Wsk Skateboard. We have a nollie backside 180 nose grind on the big handrail, I like this trick. I think it's a hard trick. I don't think that it is a hugely risky trick, but it's hard to lock in and hold that trick for that amount of time. And doing it on the big rail, it normally gets grouped in with like-minded tricks that normally score in the mid to low 80s. But I like the way that he did it. He didn't get hit with the repetition rule deduction, so we're going to give this an 85.37. And our first skater in, we have Angela Caro. This is the first line. Really hairy switch blunt slide on the big handrail. It's a difficult trick, but the execution of that was not up to par. That is a bail. That is definitely considered a bail, that 360 flip. Picking it back up with a long, nicely held backside 180 nose grind. I like the execution on that trick. Bigger flip front board on the big rail is very gnarly. No one else was doing that kind of a trick in their run. Just a frontside 50-50 on the bump to small hubba there. Going for a gap 360 flip lip slide on that gap to rail. There's a lot of risk there. He bailed on some pretty substantial tricks there, but you have to remember when you look at runs that have two bails, you need to find another run that has two bails and compare the technical difficulty and what you're left with in order to place runs like this, because it is hard to place runs that have multiple bails in them. You need to make sure that you're remembering or taking notes on what they bailed on, because that makes a big difference, whether it was on the big section or whether it was on a flat ground trick that wasn't that substantial towards their overall score. These were one of these was a pretty substantial bail, the other one not so much on that 360 flip step off. So we have other runs that are in the 30s with two bails. This is technically more difficult with that bigger flip frontside board slide on the big handrail, so it should be in a higher caliber and a higher point bracket range. So we're going to land in the mid 40s with this run. Next rider in, we have Deshaun Jordan. Starting really strong with a bump to frontside nose blunt. Really clean 360 flip on the pyramid top. Really great over crook. This line's got really good flow. I'm glad he didn't step off his board there. Wow, 360 flip lip slide. Another extra stall, keeping it going. It would have been cool if he would have done a proper trick there. Backside 180 nose run. The flow and the consistency has really been affected here. Oh, we got another bail. So this run had everything it needed to put up a really good score. He was using the course well. He obviously started really strong. The variety, his line throughout the course, I really liked. I like that in runs, when you do big section tricks, when you can hit it twice, normally the guys always get a chance to hit it twice. If you're really consistent, you can hit the big section 3 times. But I always like it when there's variation in the big section. You're not just hitting the handrail twice, and you're not just hitting the bump to hubba twice. I like that he starts with a big section trick on the hubba, and then he also tries to work in a handrail trick. It's good variety. It makes your line feel more colorful. But unfortunately, with the two bails, this line kind of fell apart, especially since it was two bails back to back, and that really puts the score in the guillotine. So I'm going to be looking at this time at my other runs that I've placed in the 40s with two bails, and that reminds me of Angela Caro's run that we just saw, and yeah, we're going to be in that territory. Next rider in, we got Iva Montero. Solid 3 flip on the pyramid to start. Nose slide nollie heel flip. I normally do not like that trick at all. It feels like a little kid trick to me, but he did do it fast and he did land it clean. Really good backside 270 lip straight into a nollie 270 heel flip. That two-piece is so great. And see, that's what I'm talking about. He did a backside nose blunt stall right there. Compared to Deshaun's run, that adds so much more. And it's not that much more difficult to do a backside nose blunt stall than an axle stall. Like, it is a harder trick for sure, but it adds so much more depth and so much more range to your run. Okay, so even though he did that 360 flip nose slide, kind of slow, somebody could argue, he did it perfect. This line was done really, really well. So I like this run. It's got a lot of technical difficulty. It's got a lot of variation. And what stands out to me is the fact that he did that backside nose blunt stall on the quarter pipe. So I immediately thought of Deshaun's run. I like this run a little bit better because I think that it fulfills a couple more points of the judging criteria. So I'm going to score this over Deshaun's. Next skater in, we have Felipe Gustavo. That's unfortunate, starting your run with a bail. It's very, very hard to recover when you start your run with a bail. Felipe is normally able to do less tricks in his run, but they're always so much more technically difficult than the rest of the field that he is able to use that strategy to get himself some pretty good points on the board. Frontside flip over the big section handrail is really cool. But again, ending with a bail. So we have two bails. We already know that runs that have technically difficult tricks on them, especially if they're done on the big section, those are going to be in the 40s, so you need to be in that territory. Next rider in, we have Matias Del Olio. Starting off with a big spin frontside board slide. As we go through the competition, you'll see this trick done so many times that by the end of the competition, it's not exciting to see anymore. He also, there's a big missed opportunity there just to do a big spin frontside board slide and travel the whole length of the park just to do an axle stall on the quarter pipe. Pretty big bail there, considering that was just supposed to be a connector trick. But again, that severely messed up the overall flow here. So again, ending with the second bail. There was some technical difficulty. This run had a little bit of flow going on in the beginning, so we already know it's going to be in that high 30s, low 40s zone. Next rider in, we have Manny Santiago. Shove it backside board slide on the big rail. I like that a lot. Nobody really does that trick. We normally always tend to reward tricks that none of the other riders are doing, especially if they're done well. It's an unfortunate miss there. That was a pretty substantial filler in his run. Trying to recover a little nollie crooked grind there. So the flow has been really, really affected by that bail, as you can tell. Kick flip, frontside flip, cool little flip trick, two-piece there. Trying to get in a last trick. And that bail will count, obviously. That was in time. So again, we're looking at a run that has two bails. So we already know what area that's going to be in. This run was a little bit less technically difficult than some of those other runs that had two bails that was in the 40s, so it would make sense for this to be in that lower point category in the 30s. So next rider in, we have Jamie Foy, and Jamie is very similar to Felipe Gustavo in the sense that he is able to do runs that have less tricks in them, but he does them so well and his trick selection is so unique that he's able to put up a competitive score even though he's not doing runs that have 9 or 10 tricks in them. Even that, like, look at how well he popped out of that gap to overcrook. No one was doing pop outs out of overcrooks like that, especially not on the gap to rails. See how it's like he's off of his board, he's taking his time, but this trick is probably going to be really substantial. Yeah, see, It's unfortunate that that was a bail there, because that would have been a really sick line and that would have put up a really good score. But because runs like that, if you have a bail in them, it really affects the score. So with that bail in it, I love the execution. I love the originality of some of the tricks that he was doing. This feels like a middle of the road 50s kind of run. Next rider in, who I always enjoy watching, is Louis Lopez. Nice front feeble. See, that was incredible. Kickflip above the coping into backside disaster is great. Followed up with a hurricane on the 5-stair rail. Little frontside nose grind on that small hubba. See, already this line has just really good energy. The overall impression is just really fun. He's hitting stuff that people aren't really hitting. Ooh, kind of a hairy kickflip there. But still a cool run, you know? He's not really stepping off his board that much. Backside lip to fakie. Cool little fakie flip there. Yeah, and he's gonna call it. He's not gonna risk it. Yeah, and that bail was after time. So the only flip trick that happened there was a fakie flip on flat. That line was creative. It had some cool tricks in there. There's not that much risk on the big section trick that he did, that backlip to fakie, but it was a very cool run. Compared to our anchor score, there's more risk for Lucas's big section tricks. He did the 270 backside lip slide and the 270 frontside lip slide. So this run can't go above that, but this line had more creative elements to it than I think Manny Santiago's high 60s run. So I like the idea of this being in that mid to low 70s. We like to reward creativity, and nobody really skates the course like Louis. And we've said it from time and time again that anybody has the opportunity to win this competition, no matter how different your style is or how unique your brand of skateboarding is. And I love having the opportunity to score runs like this substantially well. This isn't the highest scoring run that we're going to see for the day, but I like the idea of this getting a good run score. Next rider in, we have Yukito. This is an incredibly consistent skateboarder right here. Yeah, incredible way to start a run with a 3-flip lip slide on the big rail. Little axle stall there. Could have definitely been a back tail or something else besides just an axle stall. Nice backsmith. I like that he popped out of that. Again, kind of a missed opportunity there on the quarter pipe. Just a feeble grind pop out. See, strategy-wise, that was probably a bad call, as he just traveled the entire length of the course for a feeble grind on the flat bar. Makes up for it a ton with that nollie inward heel. That was incredible. Wow, yeah, switch big spin board slide there on the big handrail. So that was a really cool run. There were obviously some missed opportunities there, but the technical difficulty you have to reward. And looking at this run, this run needs to be scored higher than Louis Lopez because of the technical difficulty judging criteria. That is the most important judging criteria that we lean on when we're coming up with scores. So, I mean, the 360-flip lip slide and the switch big spin board slide on the big handrail, definitely there is an argument there to score that higher than Louis Lopez's run. So your scores should be a little bit higher. They shouldn't be crazy far away from Louis Lopez's run, but it should definitely be higher. And our last rider is Jagger. Starting with a really fast kickflip frontside board slide into a nice backside nose blunt stall on the quarter pipe. Wow. Massive backside 180 nose grind on that big bump to hubba. Jagger is incredible at following the trends of the judging criteria. He is really, really good at putting runs together that fulfills all of the categories of the judging criteria. He's really good at not repeating tricks. Yeah, the variation is great here. Switch backside lip slide on the big handrail. His flow and his consistency is great because he does tricks like that. That blunt frontside kickflip in is incredible. He didn't make it to that crooked grind in time, but I mean, that's an incredible run right there. Especially considering the use of course was there, the technical difficulty was there, the style and execution was great, the flow was amazing, and there's no repetition in this run. So at the end of the day, everyone should be saying, you know, what area can you remove points from this kind of a run? He fulfilled all the categories. So because there wasn't a trick in there that I think would score a 90 in the single trick section, I think if I look at the overall impression, this feels like a high 80s run to me. So that's where this kind of a run should land. Run 2 for Angelo Caro. The score can definitely jump up if he cleans it up. I don't know what that was. I guess we can kind of consider that a switch 180 crooked grind, but again, we know that he wasn't trying that, so it is going to come into play with just bad execution on that trick. It's not considered a bail, it's just considered, the overall impression is that it is not executed very well. So we also have a bail in this run. Landing the bigger flip frontside board slide clean again. It doesn't have great flow, even that right there, like he lost all the momentum from the shock value of doing that bigger flip frontside board slide. Picked it up really well with landing that trick, the 3 flip lip slide, but this run still has a bail in it. The style and the execution was not that good, and there was not that great a use of course. He stepped off his board a bunch instead of just hitting the quarter pipes and improving the flow. So I think that's fair for this to jump up into the 50s at a 56.42, but because of the execution, it doesn't really have a chance at jumping up into the 60s or 70s. This is Deshaun Jordan, line 2. This has the potential to score really well. Starting strong with the frontside nose blunt. Really clean 360 flip. I like how much speed he has right now. That over crook was held really nicely. Followed up with a 3 flip lib. He's got a lot of power. He's doing all of these tricks really, really well. Again, wish that could have easily been, you know, a backside tail stall or something other than an axle stall. The guys have gotten a lot better at adding actual tricks in, but still, he hasn't gotten off his board until that moment, which is fine, but the flow has been really good, and that was perfect. See, that was a great way to end that run. He fulfilled all of the judging criteria in that run. The technical difficulty was there. He had it on a couple of different tricks, not just the big section tricks, but there was technical difficulty on the filler tricks as well with the 3 flip lip slide. There was a little bit of repetition. The 2 flip tricks were 360 flip variation tricks, which is going to come into play. And the use of course was good. He did a good job of staying on his board. The style and the execution was great. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at a run that has all of these criteria fulfilled pretty well. It's not an absolutely wildly technically difficult run, but it has all the criteria enough to justify putting that into the low 80s. So that's where I see this run going. Run number 2 for Ivan. His first run was really great, and because he didn't have a bail, we already know that this is more than likely not going to be able to top that score. I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 times where someone had a bail and then got a higher score from their previous run. And that's because they threw out like a wildly technically difficult trick on the big section. So it is very, very rare. See, that's really cool. That would have been a nice upgrade from his first run to do that back nose blunt revert in. I'm guessing he probably switched up the big section. No, he's still doing 360 foot nose slide. He was probably going to do a nollie heel flip out of that, if I had to guess, that would have been a cool upgrade for that run. But because that's not there, we got to look at the other runs that have 2 bails in them. So we're going to be in that 40s range. Next run for Felipe. This is his last chance to get a good score on the board. Starting with a switchback tail is really cool. Yeah, the fakie nose slide, that being on a curb is kind of tough. Like, I like that he did the trick, but it's kind of hard to justify the risk there. He was going for a kickflip crooked grind there, fell into a kickflip nose slide. You got to make sure that's in your notes. It's not considered a bail, but it should be in the conversation. Frontside flip over the rail is great, especially when other people aren't doing that. Big section flip tricks are always normally rewarded just based off the risk alone. Again, another curb trick, like it's a cool trick, but so the things that are impacting Felipe's score the most are the fact that the filler tricks are on the smallest thing in the course. He didn't use the course very well. He kind of just stuck to that left side. And it's great that he frontside flipped over the big set handrail, but he also, the 3 flip tricks are all kickflip variation tricks. So there's not much variation when it comes to that. So repetition, the fact that he kind of stayed in one area of the course, and then there's not much risk on the 2 filler tricks that he did on the curb ledge, is going to keep this run pretty low, probably in that high 50s zone. Now we have Matias Del Olio's second run. Clean big spin frontside board slide to fakie. Traveling the whole length of the course just for that axle stall. The overall impression there is not so great. Just for a backside Smith grind on the bump to flat bar. And feeble pop over. So the technical difficulty here is pretty mild. So cleaning that up. And again, kind of missed opportunity here. I get it needs to set up fakie, but a lot of just rolling across the course in this run. Pretty good payoff. That was kind of worth the wait. Half cab nose, nollie heel flip out. He did clean. It's unfortunate there. That bail is going to count. So it's a cool run. He definitely cleaned it up, and it's going to jump up from his first run, but it's hard to place that in the 70s with ending on a bail, especially if that bail is on the big section. That's going to affect the overall score quite a bit. So this run is going to live in the 60s. We have Manny Santiago's second line. Last chance to try and get a good score on the board. Good start with the shove it backside board slide. He could have done a quarter pipe trick there and it would have really added to the overall impression. Good recovery with the kickflip crooked grind. That gap out actually looks pretty far, or it doesn't look that big in the video, but in real life it was pretty far. Sketchy little nollie crooked grind there. Again, stepping off the board, kind of affecting that flow. Quite a bit of flip tricks going on though, which is good. Judges like to see that. Let's see what he ends with here. Yeah, playing it a little bit safe there with that shove it 50-50. Again, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about big section trick variation. In this run, he hit the big section, the handrail twice, and he did a very similar trick for both of his tricks. So you really have to take that into consideration when you're figuring out what kind of a score to give this run. Because of that alone, he's got good flip tricks, but the flow and the consistency was kind of broken up by how much he stepped off of his board. This feels like a high 60s as opposed to a 70s run to me. Second chance for Jamie Foy. See, it is kind of unfortunate. This was a weird choice to start his run with an ollie on the pyramid, just like an ollie 1 foot. The only payoff was a front blunt on that pyramid. He could have just as easily started his run right here and ended differently. didn't pop out as much on that one. Still landed it clean, but again, it does affect the overall impression. If you land a trick really great the first time you do it and you don't land it as great the second time you do it, the judges are going to take notice of that. There's that fakie 5-0. So this score is going to go up, but the overall impression here, yeah, I mean, and that's, again, unfortunately, a blunt heel flip would have added so much color and so much power to this line. It would have been a great way to end it, but because he didn't land that and ended his run with a bail, that's again going to significantly impact that score. So to me, this makes me think of Mattias Del Olio's run score that we gave, which was in that mid to low 60s area, because that run also had a substantial bail in it. That's the kind of run where your score needs to be close to that run. So Louis Lopez, line number 2. His first run was a lot of fun. I wish that was like a kickflip or a 360 flip. Just the fact that that was an ollie. That was super cool. Not as clean as the first time he did it, but still clean enough to not really be docked. Just based off of the fact that no one else is going to do that in this competition as a filler trick on the quarter pipe. It's a super risky quarter pipe move. Frontside nose blunt was good. See if he cleans up the kickflip. Yeah, so that canceled it out. He cleaned up that kickflip, and now the overall impression is back to where it should be. Hopefully this trick, yeah, it's going to be harder than a backlip to fakie for sure. Yeah, unreal. Followed up by, yeah, just a backside nose blunt stall on that quarter bank. Still a cool trick. It is hard to tell the size of that bump to big hubba in this video, but ollieing over the entire thing is bananas. It is such a difficult trick to do. But remember now, this line also does not have a flip trick in it, besides that kickflip backside disaster on the quarter pipe, which was cool. Landed a little bit sketchy. So there are still some elements that are missing from this run. But man, you got to reward creativity and you got to reward risk. So I like this run being in the 80s. I don't see it going bananas into the mid 80s, but it's justified for this kind of a run, for the flow and the creativity to land in that low 80s spot. Now Yukito's first line score was really good. Let's see if he can improve it. Wow, again, perfect 360 flip lip slide, done just as clean as the first run. Same axle stall there. Nice backside Smith grind pop out, just like the first run. All right, so in the first run, at some point, you or one of the other judges should be verbalizing the fact that he only did a backside feeble grind in the first run. So you already know where you're going to be at score-wise if he does the exact same run plus that upgrade, which is looking very similar. Yep. So that's the same run, and the only addition made to that is the turn into the backside Smith from the feeble grind. So it obviously has to go up. He landed everything really clean, especially the really important tricks. So there is going to be a little bit of an upgrade here. Just turning into a backsmith from the backside feeble, it's not a huge risk, but you definitely need to be up on your score a couple points. You can't be any more than 5 points though. If you jumped up 5 points, it's way too big of a reward for such a minor upgrade. That's the kind of incremental increase that you should expect to give riders like this for minor upgrades like this run. So again, Jagger has the opportunity here to possibly jump up into a 90 score, depending on how quickly, if he can fit in that last trick, whatever that trick was going to be. Oh, he's switching it up, yeah. Instead of that backside 180 nose grind, he's got a kickflip backside 50-50 on the massive bump to hubba there. It's a great upgrade. Followed up with a kickflip. Fast frontside feeble on the bump to bar. He did a switch backside lip slide on this, his first go around. Looks like he's gonna do it again. Yep, done really well. Here's that blunt frontside kickflip. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and he didn't make it to that crooked grind. So with the upgrade, with the flip in to the bump to hubba, it is justified to give this run a 90. That is an incredible trick. We gave like-minded tricks a 90 in the single trick section when Deshaun did the 360 flip 50-50. 3 foot 50 is a little bit harder, but if we look at the entirety of the run, he's got hard tricks on all the quarter pipes. He hits the big sections twice, and both of those tricks are incredibly difficult. He's got cool filler. Everything was landed clean. There's not much else that we should ask for. The whole panel should be very vocal about this process, especially when you're considering giving a 90 score for the runs. It shouldn't be impossible to get into the 90s for a run, but man, you got to be able to hit all the judging criteria in order to be in contention to get into the 90s for your run score. But the judges love seeing this kind of a run. Checks all the boxes. We love to see it. Got to reward it. Angela Caro's single trick. So that is a bigger flip frontside board slide on the big handrail. Now, hopefully in your notes, you remembered that he had that exact same trick landed on the exact same spot. So that is going to be a full repetition deduction. There is not a specific number that we deduct, but when you do the exact same trick on the exact same spot, we're going to try and take as many points off as possible. So you are never allowed the full point total that you could have gotten if you didn't do that trick in your run. So with that single trick deduction, he's going to land at an 82.74. Now, we have to believe that if he didn't do that trick in his run, that could have easily been at least 5 points higher. And in the grand scheme of things, 5 points could make or break whether you win the contest or not. Deshaun Jordan's single trick. Okay, so this is an absolutely massive 360 flip 50-50. When you see practice, which is a unbelievably important aspect to watch practice to get a good gauge of how difficult these spots are, you'll get a good idea really quick of how big things are. And I remember seeing people bailing on just trying to 50-50 this thing, scared to roll up to it. So the fact that he 360 flip 50-50 this, locked in perfect, head speed, didn't do it in his run, it justifies being a 90. Just for the shock value alone, this is not a mid-90s trick. I would imagine if you would have done 3 flip 5-0 or 3 flip nose grind, something like that, you could justify mid-90s, but because it was a 360 flip 50-50, we'll keep it modest at a 90. So for Ivan's single trick, we have a 360 flip nose slide, nollie heel flip out. Ivan was actually one of the reasons why we created the repetition rule from this contest, actually. He already did a 360 flip nose slide on the same spot in his run, and that's repetition. So he's got to get deducted for what he would have scored if he didn't do it in his run. And because that's just on a bump to ledge, there's not massive risk in doing that. It's still technically difficult, a 360 flip nose slide, nollie heel flip out, so you have to reward it. I could see this being an 80, almost dead, but it can't go any more than that just based off of the repetition. And then Felipe's single trick. We like rewarding really technically difficult tricks when it comes to the single trick section. I tell the guys all the time at the riders meetings that you don't have to do a really technically difficult trick on the biggest obstacle on the course in order to get a good score. And I like seeing that here reflecting in the mid-70s for this trick, but it is an incredibly difficult trick, but can't forget that it's done on a very, very small obstacle, which did impact his overall score in his run section. So I like this trick being rewarded in the mid-70s, but I can't justify it going any higher than that. So for Matthias Dell'Olio's single trick section, we have a big spin flip frontside board slide on the big handrail. Now normally this always does score in the low 80s, and I like 82 for this, but if you remember back to the score that we gave Angelo Caro at a low 80s, 82, the only reason, obviously a bigger spin, a bigger flip frontside board slide is harder than this trick, but I like the visual effect of both of these tricks having the same score, because hopefully that'll make Angelo Caro understand that he got a repetition rule deduction. We already talked about scoring that bigger flip frontside board slide higher at an 87. So I like these two tricks being scored the same because there's no repetition rule deduction for the big flip frontside board slide for Matthias. And for Mandy's single trick, we have his signature Garrett Hill flip backside 50-50. He's shaking his head like that because it took him a long time to land that trick. He normally has it really easy. The Garrett Hill flip backside 50-50, again, it's not a 90s trick unless it's done on something absolutely gigantic. That probably could have been a conversation if we would have done it on that big bump to hubba. But because it was done on the handrail, it feels like a mid-80s difficulty level trick. That's normally where it scores. In order to get into the high 80s or even 90s category, it needs to be a Garrett Hill flip cricket grind or a Garrett Hill flip backside 5-0 in order to be in that territory. And for Jamie Foy's single trick, we've got a really heavy fakie ollie into a switch front feeble. Technical difficulty here, pretty high. This is a really, really tough trick. Even though this isn't a flip in, which normally reserves that 85-ish zone, nobody else is doing this trick. Fakie ollie into a switch front feeble is really, really difficult. It's easy to get hung up, and because nobody else is doing it, we got to reward it. So it's going to be in that middle 80s range. So for Louis Lopez's single trick, this frontside 180 over the big bump to hubba is a really great trick. He saw that got a substantial bump in his overall line score from his first run to his second score when he added in just the regular ollie over the big bump over hubba. So a frontside 180 is definitely going to put up a like-minded score. The fact that his run score got scored into the 80s, paired with the fact that no one else is clearing this big hubba in the way that he is, I think that it's fair to put this at an 80. Even though it is just a frontside 180, I like, if you don't reward moves like this, then you're just not gonna see creativity like this in skateboarding competitions. So you need to thread the needle and really find a happy medium of not going bananas on tricks like this, but still rewarding them enough so that you do see them and it brings some variety and it brings some creativity and some color to these competitions. Now we have Yukito's single trick, looking like a nollie big spin backside lip slide. I like this trick. That is a really risky trick. To me, that makes me think of what we scored the big flip frontside board slide. It's a moderately difficult trick. It's an easily justifiable low 80s score. So your score for that trick should be near that range of that big flip frontside board slide, especially because there's no repetition rule deduction applied to this. So Jagger was on fire in the run section. Let's see what he does for this single trick. Holy cow, yeah, that's unreal. Switch 270 backside lip. That's a wild move right there. Yeah, his reaction is completely justified for that kind of a move. In this situation, it's very easy. You should be in the 90s. High 90s is tough to justify considering it's going into a board slide variation trick, but considering it's switch and considering no one else does that trick, I like the mid to low 90s range for this kind of a trick. First up for our anchor is Gabby Mazzetto, starting with board slide, frontside board slide, a little bit of a hand touch there, so not perfect execution. I like that she kickflipped down into the bank. You don't normally see that. There's a missed opportunity there with just that kick turn on the quarter pipe. It would have been great to see a backside disaster or even an axle stall as opposed to just turning around. Hitting the big section once. I never like seeing that where a skater jumps off of their board and just runs for no apparent reason there. She didn't need to do that. She could have just ollied the pyramid. So that's going to tie into the overall impression here. And then ending with a 50-50. So these were all the most basic tricks you could do. They were done well. She didn't land anything sketchy. There was a flip trick. She hit the big section once. It's hard to go over 50 with a run like this because everything is basic, everything is stock, but it's done well. So setting an anchor score at 50 feels about right for this run. And for Gabby Mazzetto's single trick, we have a frontside board slide done on the big handrail. Now, even though she didn't do a frontside board slide on the big handrail in her run, she did a backside board slide. She did do a frontside board slide on the 5-stair handrail, which is going to result in a minor repetition rule deduction. So you should have that in your notes. We are always looking at the run that counts. This is the anchor, so we only have one run to choose from, but she did have a frontside board slide in that run. So you have to deduct in overall points when you're scoring this one. First rider in, we have Ziggy.
2, 1, here we go, rider number 1 of heat 1.
Ollie off of the side of the pyramid there, little kickflip basically done on flat. The judges don't like seeing that anymore. I feel like there was a point in time where in the women's division we were okay with seeing flip tricks done off of the bank to flat, but the bar has been raised so high now that the judges really don't like seeing that. So it should be factored into your overall impression category when you're judging. We want to see these divisions keep advancing, and if we reward runs that have tricks like that in them, we're going to be in a tight spot and we're not going to leave enough room for growth. So when we see a run like this, obviously she's really young and there's a lot of bails here. This is a low teens, maybe even single digit run. She did land a couple of tricks which would justify keeping it out of the single digits, so low teens is where you should be. Next up is Maria. Starting off with a board slide on the small ledge there. She slid a lot of it, but speed wasn't amazing. It wasn't the cleanest board slide, coming back to hit the same obstacle with the frontside board slide. Well, I called it a nollie big spin. That's really a nollie shove it. I do like that it wasn't a kick turn though. Bonelesses are kind of tricky when it comes to contests. Like, I used to do bonelesses and runs when I had nothing else to do, and there's not really any risk involved in doing a boneless, so I don't really count that as a flip trick. A boneless, it's just make sure it's in your notes, but that's not really going to move the needle on the score. And not much else happened here. We had some bails and the run kind of fell apart, so this is going to be lower. Yeah, it's definitely better than Ziggy's run because there was a lot better flow and there was a little bit more risk. This, I imagine, could be in the 20s, but with the bails, there's no way it's going out of that. Next up, we have De La Cruz. Spending a lot of time to get to that ollie there. Another missed opportunity on the quarter pipe. Bailing on the 50-50. Run's kind of fallen apart so far. Another bail. Yeah, those bank tricks are risky. They're not going to really move the needle too much on the overall impression of your run, but if you bail, that is fully counted as a bail. So it's always interesting when people work that into their strategy. So at this point, the judges should be talking about how many bails are in this run. And since there are 2, even though there's a flip trick, I'd be looking down at Ziggy's score in the teens. Because there's 2 bails, it'd be difficult to justify putting this run above Ziggy's, even though there is slightly more technically difficult tricks in this run, but that's the area that you should be in. I can't stress how important it is to be communicative with your team during a run. You should be talking during the run. Even halfway through, you should already be throwing out scores, score ranges. And that would sound something like, all right, well, she's got more bails in this run. She didn't hit that. This feels like it's probably going to be down in the single digits. Even if you say something like that, at least that gives the other panel members a chance to either agree or disagree with you. So they're already in the conversation and you already are taking care of 5-10 seconds worth of deliberating by the time you get to the end of the run. It happens fast, guys. Like when the runs are over and when you need to get trick scores in, it's so hard to explain how little time you have to deliberate. So this run has multiple bails. It should be easy to know that this is a single digit or a low teens, and you should have already been talking about that during the run. Next in, we have Funa. Man, she looks so young in this contest. It's wild how much everyone's changed in a very seemingly short amount of time. Starting strong though. I like the frontside board slide on the big handrail. Again, we've got some like kind of little kid tricks there where you do a 50-50 180 and then turn right back around into regular stance. Don't love seeing that. It's obviously like with age, you stop doing stuff like that, but coming around again. Would have been cool to get the crooked grind. Again though, it doesn't feel like a super colorful run when you do that, and hopefully you're starting to get what I mean when I say that just hitting the big section, the same big section obstacle over and over again, it is a strategy, but you should try to find ways to not heavily reward that when somebody does that. To send the right message, we want to reward somebody who skates all the different big obstacles and has the most flow and fulfills the most amount of the judging criteria. This to me is definitely not better than Gabby Mazzetto's anchor run score. It doesn't even feel like a 40s run, so I would place this in the 30s. Next up, we have Mariah Duran. That was sick. I love seeing it like straight out of the gates. The impression's good. Long feeble grind down the long rail. I like that. Little backside 50-50 on the small hubba. I mean, the caliber just feels like it's been raised right out of the gates with that kickflip. So it's good to see that. I'm sure she'll probably keep that up. Yeah, amazing hard flip. See, no one else was skating, doing flip tricks over that part of the pyramid. So you gotta reward it when it comes to judging. That's unfortunate. A big section trick is exactly what she needed in this run, and that's going to be all the time that she has. You should be looking at the anchor. Again, this does contain individually technically more difficult tricks, but with the bail, considering the bail was also on the big section, we're looking at a run that has a bail and no big section tricks. So even though I love the flip tricks that she did, I would put this close to the anchor score, but again, with the bail and compared to the flow that Gabby had in her run, which I liked, it'd be difficult to place this over that anchor score. Next rider in is Karen DeBarros. For this kind of a run, you already know it's going to be down pretty low. By the time you get to the end of the run, there's 2 bails. All we're looking at here is 2 tricks. It's a crooked grind on the flat ledge and an ollie on the 2 flat 2. So this is definitely a single digits run. If you're in the 20s or 30s, then we got some big problems. Next rider in, we have Wang Hui Zhang. She's got a board slide on the 5-stair rail, kickflip on the wedge bump, frontside 50-50 grind on the big handrail, 5-0 grind on the small hubba, ending off with a small little backside 180. You should be thinking about the other runs that are in the 40s. This feels like the scores that we gave to Mariah and to Funa in that mid to high 40s category. So if you're anywhere in that cluster, you're in the right zone because the technical difficulty is there. It's very similar, so that's the area that you should be in. This definitely would have been able to go over the anchor score if there wasn't for the bail. So it should be close to that, but that's the justification for putting it. Still, we have not been able to break that anchor score, which is wild, but here we are. Next in, we have Roos Wetsloot, starting with the board slide on the big handrail. It's smart strategy when a rider starts with a trick on the big section, whatever that is, whether it's the big handrail or a big hubba ledge. It's always a good idea to start with something like that. Followed up with a bail. We have a 50-50 on the bump to bar. Again, a backside 50-50 back to back. When a skater does the same trick back to back, the judges should be talking about that. Somebody should call it out and say at least repetition, so that every judge knows that they're going to be giving a repetition deduction. And then we're ending with a bail here. So it's 2 substantial bails in her run. This is a 20s run. There wasn't much action going on here. This could jump up quite a bit if she cleans it up and gets rid of those bails. Next in, run number 1, we have Leticia Buffoni, starting with a frontside tail slide to fakie on the bump to ledge. We have a frontside 180 on the big stair set, which we always like to see. Just an ollie on the pyramid gap there, and ending with a bail. So this reminds me of Karen, her run. Karen had a flip trick in her run, and there's also a bail, and just not many tricks. We're looking at, 3 tricks here. It's really, unless these tricks are super technically difficult, if that was like a frontside flip down the stairs, then we could start talking about some higher numbers. But because we're looking at 3 basic tricks, no flip section, or no flip trick, and not much going on here, we're down in the 30s. And our last rider of the heat, we have Isabelli, starting with the backside board slide. So Gabby did do that in her run as well. That was sick, a nollie big spin on the wedge bump. The judges all agree that big spins like that are basically the same risk level as doing a kickflip or heel flip or anything like that. So we would consider that to be the same. So very similar to Gabby's. She's using the course really well. So that's 2 big section tricks. Gabby only had 1 big section trick. So if she doesn't get a bail in here, then this is probably going to be our run that scores over. Yeah, we got the full cap there, no bail. So yeah, finally, wow, finally we made it to the end of where we have a run that beats our anchor. That was a difficult heat to clock, but this is going to be scored above Gabby's. Now, I wouldn't go wildly high above Gabby's because there is still criteria that is missing in this run. There's still more I would have liked to have seen in order to justify going into the 60s or 70s. We're still pretty far away from that because remember, the tricks in this run are basic. So please don't forget that. Sometimes there's a long stretch of bad skating and mediocre skating, and then you see one good run and it's the best run of the worst group, and you tend to want to reward that way more than you normally should. So we want to avoid that effect and just always come back to our anchor score, which is that 50. And this is pretty close to that. I would keep this in the 50s if I were you. Ziggy's second run, starting off the same. So she skipped the kickflip there that she did in the first run. Hopefully you got that in your notes. Yeah, so when you travel the whole length of the park to do a backside ollie, you can kind of at least understand. At this point, all the judges should be talking and should know where you're going to be going. She has landed less tricks in this run than her first run. And she's added bails, so this needs to be lower. This is absolutely a single-digit run score. Maria's second run, starting the same, the backside board slide. That was probably a little bit cleaner than the first run. Again, she's going to be doing the double up, the Arto, sorry. She got the front board there. That was a little bit better rotation actually than the first run. So we are cleaning this up a little bit, but considering she didn't land anything too sketchy in the first run, I wouldn't say that this is largely going to improve very much. We'll see what she switches. Okay, so there was a bail there in the last run. So she has added a frontside shove it. Deciding not to hit that obstacle, which is a really weird choice, and then now she's out of time. So that was a really weird way to end that run. She basically forfeited the opportunity to at least ollie that 2-flat-2 and get some more points and maybe creep up into the 30s, but all we're looking at is a run that doesn't have any bails, but it has a frontside shove it on flat. So if you're wondering how much to go up, it's really only a couple of points. There's not enough risk to justify jumping into a new point category, taking this run out of the 20s into the 30s. There's not enough here. She would have had to hit the big section or at least had some kind of a mid-light trick, maybe a flip trick, something. But since there's not enough to work with, she only substituted removing a bail for a frontside shove it on flat. This has got to go a couple points higher for sure than her first run, but not by much. We have Jasmine's second run now. Looks like she's starting the same, coming across the park for an ollie. See if she can get the 50-50. All right, so she lands the 50-50 180. It was real slow and real sketchy. Wow, we're going as slow as you can go right now. Kickflip. See, the overall impression, the style, and the execution are so important here. So that's a bail. And then we have another bail. So that run really fell apart. Ending with a landed trick really helps the overall impression. If you land your first trick and land your last trick, it's really going to help when the judges are trying to figure out where to place that score. But to me, this run was not looking better than the run we just saw, so it's going to be lower than our first run. And we have Funa's second run, probably going to start again with the frontside board slide. Yep, that was clean. I like that. Little frontside 180 there, little tail stall. There's that 50-50 180, and then changes her mind, turns back to regular. Burning some time here to turn around and hit the big section again. She'll probably land this crooked grind. Yep, and she does. A little bit sketchy, but she still pulls it. It's not this isn't considered a bail, what she just did right there, but it just messes with the flow and the overall impression. Now that's a bail. So immediately I'm comparing this run to Gabby Mazzetto's, and that's where you should be too. You should be looking at the anchor run score that we gave. There were some more technically difficult tricks in here, but there was a bail in this run, and it wasn't that colorful. You know, there wasn't like incredible flow. It should be close to Gabby's score, but with the bail, it's hard for me to justify putting this score over Gabby's. We really, you want, as a judge, you do really want to reward runs that don't have bails in them when you can. And I think that in this situation, we can do that. Run number 2 for Mariah Duran. She had a couple of missteps in her first run. See if she can clean it up. Such a great kickflip right there. I love the way that she starts that run. Oh man. That would have been a cool follow-up to that. Not a lot of the skaters were hitting that long down bar, so that would have been cool. A lot of time has gone by now without any tricks going down. That makes up for it. Great hard flip. But again, we're only looking at 2 landed tricks here, a kickflip and a hard flip. So not much has happened yet. So it's really, really difficult to justify scoring this high. But the frontside lip slide, yeah. So we got multiple bails here. That kind of fell apart. Unfortunately, that's going to be a lot lower than her first run. This feels like a teens run because it didn't have enough. When you bail that many times and you just don't land that many tricks, it's hard to argue giving that a substantial score over other runs that have more tricks in them. So yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to improve her overall score. Second run for Karen DeBarros. It's cleaned up a lot more. She removed the 2 bails, and we're looking at a kickflip on the pyramid gap, crooked grind on the ledge, an ollie of the 2 flat 2, and finishing up with a 50-50 on the bump to ledge. There is no big section trick in here. There is also there's no quarter pipe trick, so there's a lot that's still missing in here. And if we're looking at the anchor score, it's not even in the same territory. I don't want to chop the head off of this score, but this is definitely in the 30s. And for Zhang's second run, unfortunately, there's 2 bails now added to this run. All we're looking at is a board slide on the 5-stair rail and a 5 on the small hubba. The hardest thing in here is a frontside 50-50 on the big handrail. You got to give a little bit of credit for that trick alone, but with the 2 bails, it'd be very difficult to justify having this score be out of the 20s, considering her first run was kind of scraping into the 40s. And we have Roos's second run, starting off strong again on the big section. Judges like to see that. Even though it's just a board slide, it's still, considering the field of what we've seen, it is a good start. kind of a missed opportunity to get tricks in there. So we've only seen just a board slide on the big section handrail so far. That's cool. Frontside 50-50. Holding that on a round bar for that length of time is pretty tough. Again though, another 50-50, so we're talking about repetition here. See how much wasted time happens when you get off of your board when you don't hit the quarter pipe or the banks? And all for what? Like, all for a board slide. So we have double repetition here. She did 2 board slides and 2 different 50-50s. And I don't know if you've noticed in your notes, there's no flip trick here. So if you're comparing, you should be looking at the anchor score right now, that area, because there's no bails in this run. This is wildly safety run, but Gabby had a flip trick in her run and just had more variety. So I can't justify scoring this over Gabby's run. So we're gonna be just beneath that. And we have Leticia's second run, starting the same, frontside tail slide to fakie on the bump to ledge. There's the frontside 180 on the stair set, ollie on the pyramid gap, back 50-50 on the bump to ledge, followed up with a backside 5-0 on the small hubba, and a little back disaster on the quarter pipe. It's got good flow. She used the course pretty well. But again, compared to Gabby's, our anchor score, there's no flip trick here. When you're judging, you need to pay attention to how many different categories of the judging criteria were fulfilled. If we were to score this run over Gabby's, and Gabby came to me and asked me, hey, what did she have in her run that I didn't have? Because Gabby would be able to say, I did a flip trick in my run. I would be in the wrong. I wouldn't have any ammunition to back up this score. So before you throw out a number, there has to be some justification behind it. You have to be able to clock and come up with a reason based off of the judging criteria why you were scoring something the way that you are. So for Isabella's second run, this is interesting because it's almost identical to her first run. The only difference is that she traded out that cab on the wedge bump at the very end for a backside 180. So we have to go lower. We're gonna go a couple points lower because that cab on the wedge bump is obviously more risky than doing a backside 180. So I would shave off 3 or 4 points. You don't need to go drastically lower and go anything like a 10-point deduction. But for a minor change like that, a minor change in the overall score should be reflected. So if we give that first run a 55, then this should be a 50 or a 51. And Ziggy's single trick, we can expect a small trick here, and there we go. We have an ollie on the 2 flat 2. So there's no risk involved in that. She had ollies in a run, so there is also a repetition rule deduction. Going any higher than 25 would be really difficult to justify. So we're in that high teens to low 20s area. And for Mariah's single trick, we have that nollie pop shove it that she did on the quarter pipe, on that exact quarter pipe in her run. So that same trick, same spot. That's gonna deduct a pretty substantial repetition deduction. I mean, I'm looking down at one of the most basic trick scores that we gave out, which was an ollie on the 2 flat 2, and we were down in the low 20s on that. So that's the territory that you should be in for so many factors. 1, repetition, and 2, the way that she did it. She didn't pop it, it just kind of skirted around the edge of the quarter pipe. She didn't pop it above the coping. So for all of those reasons, the risk to me is down in that ollie on the 2 flat 2 territory, so that's where you should be, 25 and below. And for Jasmine's single trick, we have that fakie full cab on the wedge bump. It's the same one that she did in her run. And that run counted. So that's gonna be a full repetition deduction. It's a small trick, it's not a flip trick. There's zero risk involved. This is an under 20s score. We can't reward tricks like this at all. So for Funa's run, she did do a crooked grind, and that was the run score that counted, her second run. So that's the run that you should be looking at in your notes. And you'd see that she did that exact same trick on the exact same spot. So that's going to be a full repetition deduction. Normally that trick scores in the mid to high 70s. Definitely during this time it did. That's probably going to change for the next cycle, but we're going to be in the low 70s based off of the repetition deduction that we have to take in this scenario. And Mariah's single trick. We got a frontside feeble on the big handrail. It's a bummer that she wasn't able to put together a run that had a big section trick that would have really helped her overall score. But considering she didn't do any frontside feebles in a run, that counted. There's no repetition deduction. We're gonna give this a full score. It's right on the cusp. It's high 70s, low 80s. Depending on where you go, it's justified because it is a sick trick. But yeah, that's the range that you should be in. And for Karen's single trick, we have a crooked grind shove it on the ledge that she crooked grinded in her run. So we're looking at repetition, we're looking at no risk. This is down in the 20s. This is down by like the ollie down the 2 flat 2. There's no risk here. And for Zhang's single trick, we have a lip slide on the big handrail. There's no repetition rule deduction here. She didn't do one in a run. So we're looking at a full score. This is normally going to be in the low 70s. It's in that crooked grind territory. Normally it scores like a point or two underneath the crooked grind, but the risk factor and the technical difficulty level is very similar. So that's the area that you should be in. If you're 10 points away from where you scored the crooked grind, then we got an issue. And for Roos's single trick, we have a bump up to the big hubba, frontside 50-50. She did have 50-50s in the run that counted, so we are taking some repetition off. I would be looking at what we scored the lip slide, which was like a 72, low 70s. With the repetition, I'd probably be at a 70 dead. You got to knock some off, but since it's like-minded difficulty of a lip slide, it should be close to that. But because she did the 50-50s, if you're anywhere, I could see high 60s as well, but it should be in that range. That's the area that you should be in. And for Leticia's single trick, we have a really well done backside Smith grind on that little 2 flat 2 hubba. This is a really small obstacle, so the risk here is not very high. It's a pretty cool trick, but I would say that even doing a 50-50 or a backside 50-50 on the big handrail is more difficult than doing a backside Smith grind on a very mellow, very short obstacle like that 2 flat 2. So this score should be a little bit below what we scored the frontside 50-50 and backside 50-50 at that 68 range. So you should be in that middle 60s area with this trick. And so for Isabella's single trick, we have a frontside 50-50 on the big handrail. Hopefully in your notes, you clocked that she did do a 50-50 on the bump to ledge. So there is a repetition deduction here. Visually, I would be looking at what we gave Roos, which was a 70, and understand that with the repetition on something that's easier to 50-50 than that big, massive bump to hubba, I would be throwing out a score that's close to Roos's score, but below. For those reasons, for the repetition and 50-50 in the handrail is easier than 50-50 in that massive hubba. And no one else was skating that massive hubba, so you got to reward that a little bit. So that's why this score is placed just under Roos's 70.